Okay, I'm going to hand out my cute little handy-dandy, what I call the VW outline. Just see. Would you pass them back that way? And would you pass them back that way? And if there's not enough, and there's some left over on the other side, we can get back. They're pretty simple. Yes, as you can see, it's just sort of my amazing VW chart. This is comprised of years of reading other really great references. I'm giving you the names of. The two that are sort of the seminal pieces of this are something called Save the Cat by a guy named Blake Snyder. All right, so if you're familiar with that, a lot of this is going to look normal. And then there's another guy out there whose name is Jeffrey Allen Schechter, who wrote a great thing, another screenwriting thing called My Story Can Beat Up Your Story. And highly recommend it. He goes into a lot of detail. It's for screenwriting, but stories are stories. There are things you add to them or you have in them in films that make them different from things that you have in books, but a lot of this stuff is the same. So, of course, I can't keep looking at myself, so I'm going to do it off the top of my head. So what I'm seeing here, for outlining, and as I say, it's a compendium of what Snyder and Schechter both sort of said and some other stuff, is the concept that we talk about the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, the end of the story. And when we look at that, we can, we're all sort of like, okay, well, my story begins here, my story ends there, and and then we put in a little space in between, and then a miracle occurred. We're trying to figure out how to make the miracle. So what this hopefully will help you do is sort of look at things and say, yeah, I know that part, I know that part, I know that part, I'm doing fine. What you see is in Act 1, it's also called the thesis, the normal world. We have a little line going down into Act 2 where on that line there it says orphan. If you think about almost every book, every film you've looked at, something happens to make your hero or heroine an orphan. Where they start that way, Harry Potter, Luke Skywalker. The minute I start bringing it up, you go, oh yeah, they get moved into this world where they're really pushed out of their normal place. Then they, as Snyder says, break into Act 2. And in the first part of Act 2, they're a wanderer. They're trying to find out what they're doing. Again, you see sort of that with Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, where he's learning more about Hogwarts and this and that and doesn't know anything. And we get to the famous midpoint. And the famous midpoint is one of the things that's been missing in the 3-act structure. It's always been there, but people don't mention it. Somewhere in the middle of Act 2, always in the middle of Act 2, something happens. There's usually either what they call a false victory or a false defeat. In the case of Star Wars A New Hope, the false victory was when they rescued Princess Leia and they got off the Death Star. And there was this, oh, but they planted a tracking device on us, that battle was too easy. False victory. And at that point, though, you start seeing your hero move from being a wanderer to learning to become a warrior. Along there, Luke becomes more and more warrior, until we hit that break into 3 when he starts becoming what Schechter says is the altruist or the martyr phase. He said martyr phase first, where you're willing to give up everything to save everybody else. You're actually moved into this new level of thinking. So that's the W part of my little amazing VW outline. The top part of the V is really, really kind of important. There's 2 things with that V. The first is, at the beginning of our story, we usually have a desire. Oh, I want to be I want to fight the rebellion, or oh, I just, want to find a home and friends and people who understand me. At the midpoint, it changes from a desire to a need. I have to have this. We have to find a way to destroy the Death Star before it destroys us. It is now a need. It is no longer a desire. And that's a huge switch in your character. Schechter, when he was looking at this, when he came up with these 6 phases, he was quoting somebody whose name I can't remember right now, who's looking at phases of development in humans. And there were two phases that he missed, which was innocent and mage. And then he realized that they sit up on the top and they break at the axe, which is why it's up there on my V. You start off innocent, you're slowly losing it. You become more and more worldly and understand. And at the midpoint, then you start becoming the mage, a master of what you know. And Star Wars, the first episode 4 is a great example of that. All the beats kind of fall out there. And that, is kind of it. The idea, though, is when you're outlining, you know, if you're, let me go back up there. Why do we outline? There's a number of reasons to outline. A lot of people don't outline short stories. I generally tend not to. The reason for having, there are a couple of reasons for having an outline. One is so we know where we're going, and we can spot little mistakes along the way and fix them before we're 100 or 200 or 300,000 words into our great masterpiece and realize it's not working. The other is it can be used as a selling tool. Sometimes nowadays in the world it's more likely because of the recession that you'll sell a completed book. But even so, you may gain interest with an outline in 3 chapters of the book. When you become a published author, that may be the way to break in. Still right now, it's kind of more like people want to see finished manuscripts, but you'll find this useful. You'll find it useful also if you've written the full novel and it's just not working. Then here's a real quick thumbnail of, okay, did I notice this? Did I get this beat? This is, you know, what's missing here? Was there an actual midpoint break? Something happened, some battle, some victory, some defeat, some clunk that puts us into that second half of the book, the second half of the story. Was my person becoming, you know, had they been a wanderer and have they now determined, you know, I'm going to go fight. I'm not going to go just try and figure out where I'm going. I'm going to go fight for something that's right. And that leads them into that break into the third act where they're actually combining what they do in the original world. In the middle part, Act 2 is kind of the upside down world. Another classic example would be The Wizard of Oz. You know, Dorothy starts out regular Earth, spends all of Act 2 in Oz, and then finally comes back home. It kind of comes back home for the end of Act 3. That's really more like the denouement. But even so, still sort of fits that. Harry Potter, the Harry Potter books were always, you know, the break into Act 2 was the train into Hogwarts, usually going through a tunnel, which is a very old thing to say we're going through change. And then again, we come back, especially at the end of the first one, where Harry says that, what's his name? Dudley doesn't know that I can't use magic outside school. So he's come up with some new, you know, great power that he can use to at least keep the field level rather than being beaten up all the time. That's in the book. The movie's kind of different. So, having done all that in about 5 minutes, does anybody want to take a deep breath and collect themselves and start asking questions? Or do you now know it all and I can expect you all to go off and write great stuff?
I just ordered the book you recommended.
Which one?
My Story Can Beat Up Your Story. I already had Save the Cat.
Do you have all 3?
No, I just had the first one.
I would recommend, who else has got Save the Cat by, okay. So Save the Cat, it's marvelous. It's got this subtitle that says, the last book you'll ever need on screenwriting.
And then he writes 2 more.
And then comes Save the Cat Goes to the Movies. The next to last, I can't remember what he subtitled that. I think it was Save the Cat Goes to the Movies, which is a great little book. In Save the Cat, he's talking sort of filmic, but I think it still moves over. He says that there's kind of 10 types of genres. And he spends more time, the genres are things like fish out of water story, the buddy love story, which can also include regular romantic love story, the golden fleece story. That's anything where you're on a journey to get something, the magical elixir. Star Wars is a golden fleece. Titanic is kind of a golden fleece, although it could also be called a buddy love, but I think he calls it what he calls an epic fleece, which is a particular type of golden fleece story. Lord of the Rings is a golden fleece story. Except it's kind of in reverse because instead of finding something, well, they have to find Mount Doom and get rid of the ring, but they're kind of getting rid of the ring. but all of these have those same elements, and there's a lot of elements in each of these story types that are the same. And if you can recognize it when you're looking at your book, you say, oh yeah, I guess I'm writing a this. It's going to help clarify a lot of things. And in Save the Cat Goes to the Movies, he actually talks about, you know that your book or your screenplay is about this if you meet these three things. And then goes ahead and breaks them down a little bit more. And then finally comes Save the Cat Strikes Back. And after that, the guy died, unfortunately. But Save the Cat Strikes Back in some ways is the best of the lot, from my opinion, because he talks about, when Blake Snyder works an outline, he's got a much more detailed, in-depth 15-point outline, which is pretty cool. But he talks about one point that we see in everything called the dark night of the soul, which is, it happens. And the thing that he talks about in Strikes Back, among other things, is the dark night of the soul for the writer. I'm trying to remember if I have a copy of it that I could bring it up. And I just recently came across something that was fairly similar. It was actually for gaming, but it was sort of like, it was 6 points. It was like, this is brilliant. This is difficult. Then, pardon my language, this is shit. Point 3. Point 4, I am shit. Then, maybe this is possible. And then 6, this is awesome. But we go through those phases as a writer. Even J.K. Rowling was talking about it. You go through a point in time when you're writing when you think, you shouldn't bother, you shouldn't waste your time, there's no reason getting out of bed, putting those words on paper, just mean to everybody in the universe, and even if you just put it electronically, you're wasting perfectly good electrons to no reason. Why did you bother? It's the dark night of the soul. Now the thing to remember about the dark night of the soul is also, as you see in the books, it also is that point when you finally hit the breakthrough moment and go, aha, here's how I can solve my problem. So dark night of the soul for the writer is a really important thing to recognize when you hit it, because it stops you. If you recognize it, oh, okay, so now I'm going to go from the dark night of the soul, all is lost, and I can get through the end of this if I just push through. He also has some great advice. The best advice I've ever heard from him, which is similar to Stephen King's advice, but his advice is, let it be bad. A lot of times we're writing, a lot of people will rewrite and rewrite because these words aren't the perfect words. These words aren't blah, blah, blah. I don't know how to get from here to here and whatever. Well, instead of stopping, say to yourself, here's a bad way to do it. And put it in there, and later on you can come back and revise it and come up with a better one. But you'll be able to move forward and get the story right. And the cool thing that happens with that is a lot of the times you find out this bad way of doing it was the best way to do it. So allow yourself to be bad. Allow yourself to say, you know, these words are the best words I can write. But I'm going to write them today so that I can get on and finish my story. And then, because as Stephen King says, you write the first version for yourself. Second time around, I'll come through and I can revise it so that other people can read it. But that's, I think, another great piece of advice, which is why I would recommend picking up the third book. All 3 books, actually. So, any questions, thoughts, observations?
So you said that you typically didn't do an outline for a short story. However, if you're just starting out with fiction, is it a good idea to outline a short story?
There's 2 schools of thoughts on writing. One is, you know what you're writing, and you write it, which involves an outline. The other is, you grow it organically. You sit down, it was a dark and stormy night, which, by the way, you're supposed to not use. So, of course, immediately I go, okay, how can I tell a story and make it work with it was a dark and stormy night? But, you know, it was a dark and stormy night, and then a knock came at the door, and da-da-da-da-da. And what you have is a story that kind of meanders and doesn't go anywhere, and usually they drop dead. Organic stories drop dead because they don't have a direction. When my mom wrote, she got to the point, I think, at some point you get to the point where a lot of the rules of writing are in you, and you don't need to sit there and write them down. Sometimes it can be really useful, though, particularly when revising. But if you know how it's going to end, there's another really good book on writing, and it's a screenplay writing book, but it's also on writing. It's called The Anatomy of the Story. It's by John Truby. He's got an incredibly long 22 steps for writing stuff, and he talks about worrying about the moral character and how your hero does something that's immoral, which causes them, you know, to jeopardize everything. And we see this a lot in movies, and then they do some great moral act to retrieve themselves. But it's very, very in-depth. And most of the times I look at it and go, oh gosh, I guess if I could sit down and write this, I'd come up with something brilliant, but I don't know. On the other hand, he did say something really important, which is, you have this, at the beginning you have a desire which becomes a need, and at the end of the story, your hero or heroine learns something about themselves. There's a self-revelation, which is the thing that changes them enough to be able to overcome the ultimate problem. And so from his point of view, if you know how they're going to change at the end, then you know what the problem and the need is, the desire and the need is that they have, and you have basically the guts of the story. So if you write to, it's going to end this way, or as I like to say, here's some aiming mistakes. I think it's going to end here and go that way. You can get a short story done that way. On the other hand, an outline's going to let you know a lot quicker. I got it, or write it. Take a look at the outlines and say, can I actually turn this to the middle of the story and see middle of the story? Is this thing hitting here? Damon Knight had I can't remember the title of his book. He has a book on writing out from a long time back, and he says that he believes that people, as they grow as human beings, go through 4 different stages of the types of writers they are. When we're really young, we write stories where basically we're the hero and we invent the death ray or the flying machine or the whatever, and we add these, it's bigger and it's bigger and it's bigger and it's bigger, and isn't it great? And that's the story we write when we're little, because we're learning. We get a little bit older and we start learning a bit more about, okay, stories shouldn't always be about us. We kind of need to have something happen, not just we get more good toys. And maybe we have to fight somebody and we win. And so that's kind of like the second phase. And at some point you get to the third phase where you're looking at structure and how does that work. And then supposedly there's a fourth phase you get to where you kind of know structure and you're just perfecting the craft. So I would say that if you feel you're in the third or the fourth stage, outlining a short story may be really good. On the other hand, you gotta, at the end of the day, you're going to find the way that works for you. Everybody's different. Kevin Anderson writes his novels by taking an hour or hour-long, 2-hour-long hikes into the woods and bringing a little voice recorder and dictating a chapter into the voice recorder every day. That's a really strange way of doing it from my point of view. Other people go ahead and they take index cards and they put the points that they want to have happen in the story, and then they rearrange them until they like that, and then they write it out. That's the way a lot of screenwriting is done. So everybody's different, and you kind of want to experiment. There is also the greatest danger, the one I love watching the most, at least. It's called the writer's dance. And in the writer's dance, best example of the writer's dance is the night you go ahead and you get an old toothbrush and you go to your bathroom to scrub it from floor to ceiling, because you just have to have that bathroom perfectly clean before you can write another word. Okay, it's a way to avoid writing, and it can happen a lot of ways. You can do the famous, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'll just be writer's group. They say that word's wrong. I'm going to fix it, and I'm going to fix this, and I'm going to fix that. At some point, at the end of the day, really we like to have people read our stuff and share the experience and the impact that it had on us with them. At the end of the day, though, when you get down to it, the way you know that happened is somebody gives you a check for a large sum of money that says, we're going to publish your story. So that's kind of where you want to be. And until you can send it out to somebody and they can send you that large amount of money, you're never there. You're not a professional writer yet. So the trick is to get yourself to, and the other thing about being a writer is you don't write one story. You're not here for a story. If you want to write one story and that's it, that's fine. And there's something, Harper Lee did that. Hasn't written a thing since. But she wrote a full novel. And she had Truman Capote being around for her. But most people write more than one. And you sort of want to be, especially if you're writing short stuff, you want to be saying, okay, when I finish this short story, I'm going to start this next short story. Because you're going on a journey yourself when you're writing, and you want to continue the journey, not stop. So I would recommend you follow following Heinlein's rules: write it, finish it, edit, send it out, keep sending it out until somebody sends you a check. One of the great places to send it to, Orson Scott Card says it should be the first place you send things to, and I'm sure I disagree with him on this, is the Rage of the Future. You can submit once a quarter. So if you sit there and you say, I don't have enough time, well, in 3 months, you can knock out 5,000 words. That's a short story. Guaranteed in 3 months, you can knock out 5,000 words. So why not say, once a quarter, I'll submit a story to Rage of the Future. Kevin Anderson started that strategy and never succeeded, because by the time he'd written 12 stories, he was already a published author and he was no longer eligible. So just as a strategy of, I'll send it. Hey, if Writers of the Future doesn't like it, Orson Scott Card says you should send it out to some of the science fiction magazines or whatever appropriate market it's for. Also, if you're going to write Writers of the Future, they're looking for fantasy or science fiction. So you want to know the market, but they're probably one of the best markets to go to. That's if you're doing short stories. If you're writing novels, it's a harder, it not only has to be perfect, it has to be perfect first time, and it's harder to break in. Really though, if you write and it's good, and that was the best piece of advice I've heard recently was from Eric Flint, who's written some great stuff, including the 1632 series. And he said, I can't do Eric's gravel voice quite right, so he's a really nice guy, you should do. Eric said, at the end of the day, more than anything, what makes a writer is persistence. Not luck, not even skill, but continuing to do it, because after a while you get better and better. Also, as writers, one of the reasons writers like me and Jim Butcher and everything have writers' workshops and all this is not to brag, but because writers always start out as readers, and we want more stuff to read. And so we want you all to write stuff that we want to read. We want you to write stuff. I can't guarantee you that I'm not going to want to read what you've written, but that's okay. At least as long as the pool gets bigger, there's going to be a book in there for me. So that's why we do this. We really would like to see more people enjoying it and having fun. Pause here. Any questions? Observations?
Who did you say spoke about the 4 phases of writing?
That was Damon Knight. K-N-I-G-H-T, who apparently is no longer with us. I met him a long time ago. There are a couple places to go if you want to do writers' workshops. There's, of course, the famous Clarion and Clarion West. Clarion's down here in San Diego now, and I'm a graduate of Clarion West, which is actually up in Seattle. Clarion used to be in Michigan or Ohio, someplace like that, someplace in the middle of the country. But what they do, and it's a hard run. You spend 6 weeks together on a campus over the summer. You and 19 other wannabe writers. Each of you writes 1 story a week and critiques 19 other stories in that same week. And you meet every day to critique stories. And from my point of view, I learned the most not critiquing other stories, but listening to other people's critiques of the same stories I read. It's kind of like, I didn't see that in that story. But it's touted as a writer's boot camp. It's very intense. You would want to be able to dedicate total time to it. I think it's roughly $3,000 for the 6 weeks because it includes room and board. Part of the thing that's important is you're with other like minds, people who want to be writers. They have each week, up at Clarion West at least each week, they have a different writer or editor in residence. They get some amazing people up there. And these writers in residences will read the story submissions. They're part of the critique group. So not only will you get it from other people who want to be writers, but you'll get it from published authors. You can get different opinions. A lot of times, the week 5 will be an editor, and a number of people have sold stories straight out of Clarion West to the editor, the guest editor. Usually the week 6 person is a sort of an off-the-charts sort of a person, great writer, but writes in a different way. And they usually sort of say something like, everything you've heard here is only whisperings or something like, don't take it all to heart. Clarion West is pretty intense. There were 20 of us. I think 4 of us are still writing now since in 20 years old, 22 years old. A lot of people find that it's not working for them, or they get burnout. they think, oh my gosh, 6 weeks, and I didn't sell the story, or whatever. Everybody has different reasons for going. When I went up there, I wanted to try writing all sorts of different stuff. So I wrote some horror, I wrote some science fiction, I wrote some fantasy, I wrote some comedy, whatever. I was just exploring. Other people where their job was to sell a story by the end of the workshop. Okay. So more questions, thoughts, comments, helps. Where are we at? Yes?
So slightly different but related topic. To sell a novel, I'm pretty sure you have to have an agent. Does it help you get an agent if you've at least sold short stories and can in your cover letter say, you know, I've done these short works and here's an outline and some chapters for a novel?
Well, okay, getting an agent. Certainly it helps to have published things. The best way to get an agent is to have actually sold a novel. And you go, oh, hey, I just sold a novel. I need an agent. Why? Okay, first of all, how many people understand about literary agents? Yeah, I'll give you, okay. All right, so just one. Literary agents, Hollywood film agents are only allowed to collect 10% of your income. Literary agents generally go for 15%. Of course, they got a smaller amount of the pie anyway. A literary agent is, it's kind of like a marriage. You know, you want to choose wisely. Divorce, leaving an agent can get really hard and messy, just from an emotional point of view. But what an agent is good for is they know the market, they know the editors, they can line your work up, particularly the novel-length stuff, with the best house. They also can do a great job of being the bad cop and the good cop, bad cop thing. Say you signed a contract for a novel, and you're writing the novel and it's going great, and then all of a sudden you hit a brick wall, or you know, some disaster happens, and you're not going to make the deadline that you agreed on with your publishing house. Not a good idea, by the way. So you can call your agent, and your agent can be the one to say, I'm sorry, but so-and-so. So you don't have to be the one that drops bad news. Your agent can also be the one that says, yeah, no, really, we're not going to go sell all film rights immediately. That's just not going to happen. You don't have to be the bad one. And also, you don't have to specialize in how to sell a book thing. You can specialize in how to write a book. So that's why agents are very useful, and most people have them. Some people don't, and can do fine with it. You want to be able to read contracts, you want to be able to spot mistakes in them, you want to be able to stand your ground and flag things. Yes?
Sorry.
Oh, okay, well, I'll finish and then I'll get to you. I saw your hand up. I was wondering if it was an immediate. So an agent is very useful. Probably the best way to find an agent. The Writer's Digest has a list of who's buying what, and also who's agenting for representing what. Look, if you're writing something that sort of fits in the Harry Dresden world, and Dresden file, not in the world, but similar to, say, maybe you want to look to see what agents are in that field. Look to see who's got which agents. Then send off a query letter. I'm writing a such and such. Would you be interested? Because there's no point in paying all the postage to send off your manuscript and everything else, only to have it, or even email it in, only to have it turned down. So send a query letter. They'll usually, if you say, well, we will be willing to look at it. There are even some publishing houses that will take stuff, slush pile stuff. As a matter of fact, I think Bain Books does stuff. This is the other thing. The slush pile is this bunch of unread, unsolicited manuscripts that come in, and the process is some poor assistant, maybe wannabe someday editor gets assigned, you need to read 5 of these a week and give us your feedback on it. And they're looking for the pony in the manure pile. They're looking for that one thing that they're going to get behind that you say, this is ever, you guys have got to publish this. This is brilliant. And that's what publishing houses are good for. Some editors can go, this is brilliant. And with luck, everybody else is going to go, yes, this is brilliant. And the artists are going to go, the art department's going to go, this is brilliant. And the marketer's going to go, this is brilliant. And before you know it, your name is right up there with J.K. Rowling, and life is great. You want to, your editor, your agent will be your first most enthusiastic person. Your editor will be enthusiastic for that book and hopefully for more. But that's kind of what's happening is you are, these are your first readers. At the end of the day, then it finally gets on the bookshelves or up in the ether, and people hopefully find it and buy it. So with an agent though, find out if they're open for submissions, find out who they're repping, if they're repping somebody similar to you, and see if you can meet them. There's some agents come to scientific conventions. For that matter, some agents go to, there's a couple of different writers' workshops. There's a Cascadia Writers' Workshop where I think agents come in. In science fiction conventions, the one place where agents seem to be most is the World Fantasy Convention. It seems to be more of a business thing. It's got a strictly limited membership. Once they hit a particular level, they won't take anybody. So you just kind of have to sign up early. But it's considered more of a professional convention than all the others. The others are kind of like for everybody, whereas World Fantasy seems to be for mostly writers and publishers. I don't know, most of them. But that would be sort of a place to look. I found my agent because at the time I wasn't thinking of writing full-time. And but he was the agent for Diane Duane, who wrote So You Want to Be a Wizard and some other really great books. And every time I'd meet with her and he'd be coming by, he was always polite, he was always, willing to engage in everything. And he struck me as somebody who was quiet, meek, looked like he'd be unassuming, and then he'd pounce like a tiger. Yeah, I kind of like that in an agent, somebody who really knows the business. And he'd been an editor himself before he went into agenting, so that's why I chose my agent. And again, I was in the position where I could call him up and say, I've got this contract, would you like to represent me? Which is the great place to be, because that's free money. Now, interestingly, my agent sat there and quizzed me for 2 hours on what I was going to write about, what I plan to write about in the future, and this, that, and the other, because they don't want you for one book. There's no point representing you for one book. If an agent wants to represent you for one book, you want to think really carefully. Because basically, they may not really know what the business is about. For them, they would like you to have 50, 60, 100, 200 books out there on which you and they are both receiving royalties. And I think that's the sort of thing to look at for an agent. There are lots of agents out there. There's an agent's guild, I think. You can check out more pretty much online. But big thing is, are they interested in your career, not just your book? Are you able to work with them? And the things that we forget as writers, because we go through so much, is that an agent is somebody who's working for you and not your therapist. Because oftentimes we're sitting there, oh my God, there's nobody, what do we do? It just happens. It's part of what happens. And you had a question. You still have a question.
I'm trying to get into the publishing field to work in it. Literary is one of the things I was interested in. I'm currently finishing a bachelor's degree in English. Is there anything else you can recommend that would make me more appealing to an employer? That kind of.
Well, I'm kind of allergic to English degrees mostly. I mean, you're not thinking of becoming a writer yourself?
I do want to write, but
okay.
I would probably do that on the side.
All right. Well, one, if you wanted to do anything in the literary field, move to New York. That's where still all publishing houses are, that's where most of the agents are, and that's where you make your contacts. You would probably, my guess is you, and I don't know for sure, but my guess is you'd probably want to take the gorgeous job of editorial assistant or intern, aka unpaid gopher. And you would be one of those poor people reading slush. The good news about reading slush is at some point you can tell when to pass. Anything that starts with "it was a dark and stormy night," you should put aside. Even if no, you might read on, but typically, my editor up at Clarion West was a guy named Gardner Goswami, who used to write edit for Asimov's magazine. And Gardner told me horror stories about submissions he'd get, particularly the cover letters. One of the sadder ones is, "My mom really liked this book." Then there was the person who said, "I know you're going to hate this, so I don't know why I'm bothering to send it to you." Not a successful submission letter. And then there was the one that included $50.
Whoa.
I will bribe you for this. And then there was the one, he said if the guy had worked as hard on this short story as he did on what he put in my envelope, I probably would have bought it, but it was handcrafted to when you opened it up and pulled it out, a little hand would pop up like this. Came out. I was like, okay. So you're going to get a lot of, you know, as an editorial assistant, you're going to, I mean, even as an agent, at the end of the day, you're looking to see talent, so you're going to see untalent. But breaking into agenting, that's, one, I'm not an expert on it. Two, it's really hard. Three, you got to be lucky. Because at the end of the day, you're going to want to find writers that you believe in and that deliver and that get lucky. So I would definitely say the first thing along the way, you might want to look at an MFA nowadays in English. If you're going to be an agent, you want to know, you at least want to know somebody who knows bookkeeping and accounting. You need to know legal stuff. You need to be able to read a contract and spot the loony in it. There's some great contract clauses that sound great until you actually think about them. One of the ones is fairly typical writer in a contract. We get first right of refusal on your next book. And that sounds great. You know, that means they want to see your next book and they're going to, they're hoping to buy it from you. But if they say no, or until they say no, you can't send it anywhere else. Now the problem with that is, until they say no, you can't send it anywhere else. So they can basically sideline you. You can write, you know, you have one book, and your first book was okay, but your second book is this batted out of the ballpark, but it's an entirely different genre, or something happened at the office. A lot of times what kills careers is an editor leaves the company. You know? So the editor that loved your book is gone someplace else, or has left the industry altogether, and you're toast. Because the next guy might have to pick up this new book or sequel or whatever else. So definitely, you know, New York City, God love you, or suburbs thereof, and a massive commute, and probably interning with one of the publishing houses, which is hard to break into because everybody's trying to do that. You might see about reading slush for somebody, and you know, offer a read slush. There's a couple of places that are looking for people who are willing to read slush pile. The thing with reading slush is you're going to learn a lot. You're going to learn a lot about how quickly to see something doesn't work, how quickly to see something does work. Catherine Rush used to say, you know, I would read this short story and I got to page 5 before I dropped it. I got to page 3, where I gave up on the first paragraph. And sometimes you can just see it. It's just like, you know, this doesn't. The nicest thing you can say about a story that you don't like is, this doesn't work for me, which is probably the most honest thing too, because at the end of the day, you know, it might work brilliantly for the people who love zombie books, but if you don't like zombie books, you know, it's like, no. So yeah, it can be fun, and I mean, the cool thing about building, you know, becoming an agent and finding new people and building them up and all is huge. The other thing you want to know about is, where's the industry going? And if you can answer that question, you can become very rich, because nobody knows. Bookstores look like they're on their way out. How do you get noticed when Amazon owns Goodreads, and you know, that's kind of the only way to get out there. Pricing your book at 99 cents is not a way to get anything done. You know, my agent said to me that the best way to actually get along in this field is to write a good book. That's kind of the one thing you can do, write something that's good. Keep writing things. Anyway, does that answer the question? Okay, more questions? What, have you got one?
Sort of.
Huh?
Sort of.
Sort of, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I love this
Okay.
outline. And then, I guess the big outline, do you ever, because so I wrote my first book. It got published.
Oh,
and it got picked up in Spain. And so then I published another book, and the guy went out of print right away, and so I have a third book out. And so I'm publishing a bunch of stories, but it kind of feels like it's like, you know, it doesn't necessarily feel like.
Well, okay, first question. Is this your day job?
More or less.
Okay, so that makes it much harder, because not being able to make money out of your day job always sucks. So, you're self-publishing now?
No.
Okay, so you got a publisher, but a Spanish publisher.
No, I have an American. Well, I haven't. The first one I went to, I just did one book with them because we didn't get along that great. And then my book article got sold in Spain. But I didn't get anything for that because they own the rights. And
Yeah, don't do that. Get yourself, first thing, get yourself an agent.
so I've been trying to do that, and I had a couple that, I had like 2 or 3 agents that didn't work out very well. And so I'm just trying now with my newest stuff to get an agent, which I guess is what to do.
Well, probably. But if you're not working out with agents, I mean, I hope each time that you didn't work out with an agent, you learned a lot from it. You know, that you went with an agent and then you guys had a divorce, as it were, and you're now with a new agent. You got to be careful about agent hopping. Because, you know, if somebody comes and says to me, well, I've had 20 agents and none of them have ever done me any good, I'm kind of going, maybe.
Right,
well,
except
it's not
they're,
the agent.
they all, like 2 of them got out of it. One went into online publishing instead of becoming an agent. So that was that.
How do they, are they planning to make any money? I mean, that's kind of dead.
She was a big agent too. I was so excited. And then by the time she was ready to work with me, because I was last on the list, she went into a rut. The other one's son had a drug problem, so she quit to pick. So it wasn't like, I didn't feel like it wasn't me. It was,
all right.
And the other one also changed, went into a paid editing thing. So.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Do not, the rule of thumb should always be that money flows to the writer. Somebody says, oh, if you give me $1,500, I'll publish your novel. That's the wrong direction. They're supposed to pay you. So anytime somebody says, I want money from you, you gotta, that's a warning sign. Usually it's a no. Agents take money from when you've actually earned stuff. That's a different story. They're not taking it up ahead of time before you get, oh, pay me $500 and I'll make sure your manuscript is good enough to get sold. No. But yeah, you've got how many books now that you finished?
That I finished, or that I have 3 that were published.
Okay.
And I have 2 other ones that are now. Well, one is a full-size novel that's out there, and one is like it's a connected series of shorts, like Illustrated Man, that's probably no double length.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked that question is because, as you probably discovered, the more you write, the better you get. So you're moving up.
I hope.
Well, I mean, you got it. I mean, Dark Night of the Soul.
Dark Night of the Soul, yes.
So I think probably you're just going to have to keep on beating the streets and writing more stuff. At the end of the day, as I said, persistence seems to be about the #1 thing. So be persistent. And Eric Flint, when he told the story about persistence, he was one of the winners of the Writers of the Future way back when, and is now a judge of the Writers of the Future. But he said it was 4 years between winning the Writers of the Future and selling anything else. So you got to be persistent. You can't give up. And look for agents that are in your field and